Hello today. This is Keosha Davis, aka Miss Kitty. How you doing? We're going to talk about overcoming rejection, and the topic tonight is why we suffer rejection. So this is the why. Okay? So if you hear me say deliverance, all it means is the action of being rescued or set free. Okay? Being liberated, being released from something. It can also mean a formal or authoritative utterance, which means taking authority over something and calling it out what it is. Okay? So you can be released from it. So you can be free from it. Okay? So, why we suffer rejection. All right? So, the book, like I said, we're coming from is Overcoming Rejection by Frank and Ida Mae Hammond. So he talks about after observing conditions of the average persons that needs deliverance or that needs to be freed, that needs to be rescued, he has come to the realization that negativity or the devil or the enemy, whatever you want to call it, forms a strategy to capture a person's life as early as time of conception. Okay? Conception. As soon as that egg hits the mother's womb and that sperm fertilizes it. Conception. Okay? Alright. Now, the strategy is to attack a person in the womb through rejection. And he does it, or it does it that early. Okay. Sometimes it's harder for rejection to happen later on. I mean, it does happen later on. We already know that. But the easiest time for it to happen is when we're kids or we're babies. That is the most easiest time. That is our most vulnerable state. Because that is the time where our parents are our gatekeepers. Our parents are supposed to protect us. So if you have some people who parents did not protect their children, it was open sesame for them for anything to happen, unfortunately. And some parents just didn't know. Some parents don't know to protect their children. So it's an open door for rejection to set in automatically. So like I said, we're going to talk about the why today. All right. Some things that causes rejection can be curses, like generational curses. Okay? Those are some things that can open up rejection and come in our life as early as possible. All right? An example of a generational curse can be rape, molestation, verbal, emotional, and physical abuse, and physical abnormalities. How many of us has dealt with that? As a matter of fact, some people deal with that their whole life. Okay? All right. Rejection causes a wound. It causes, like, if you want to think of a real life example, it can cause a scratch or a gash. Okay? And the result of it is trauma. So think about it. When your arm gets cut, or you get some kind of a gash or anything that breaks the skin, okay? That's trauma. There's pain behind that. All right? And so resulting trauma from an open wound, as far as in the mind or in your heart or in your soul, okay, spiritually, the trauma of that, the event of that trauma combined with anger and hatred and rage, okay, can create the open door for rejection, which opens the door for the devil or negativity or negative thoughts to overtake us or to enter in. Like I said, much like a physical wound, if you get cut and you don't treat that wound, okay, you don't treat that scratch, and you don't give it the proper care, guess what? An infection happens, right? Right. It sets in. Okay? And so that's how we have to treat our inner man. That's how we have to treat our hearts and our minds and our souls the same way. If we suffer something and something happens, trauma, and we don't get the help that we need, guess what? Infection sets in. And some of us, we don't know that. A lot of us don't know that. Because if we did, we wouldn't be walking around with a lot of these issues that we're walking around with. Me, for one, I'm one of them. If I knew then what I know now, I'll be a lot farther along, right? Right. But it's never too late. Remember that. We are all overcomers. No matter who you are. No matter who you are, we are all overcomers. Okay? Remember that. All right. Like I said, if we don't treat the wound with care, the infection may set in. So it's the same thing when it comes to our inner self. Same thing when it comes to our mind. Same thing when it comes to our soul. Same thing when it comes to our heart. All right? But we are all overcomers. Okay? So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that, some examples of rejection. Now, like I said, I already mentioned generational curses. All right? And so parents' negative attitudes and addictive habits. Okay, so when I was looking at reproductivefacts.org, it states that a man that drinks alcohol, okay, it can affect the shape of a sperm, okay, as well as how much sperm he produces, right? So if the sperm is abnormal, and it fertilizes an egg, do you think that there might be some kind of issue with the baby? Now, the website does say that there is no testing or evidence that supports that. Okay? But logically, think about that. If you're drinking alcohol as a man, and it affects your sperm. This may not happen to everybody. Sometimes it might be a hit or miss. But think about it. It's just an example. If you're drinking alcohol and it affects your sperm and it makes it abnormal or something wrong and an egg gets fertilized, wouldn't that have an effect on the baby? It can have an effect on the baby's development or anything. That's just my opinion on that part. Okay? So, like I said, rejection must have an open door to enter. So that could be one way rejection can enter, causing an abnormality. All right? Results from trauma, a result from trauma from an event that happened in our life. What happens with trauma? We get angry. We hate people because of what happened. Especially if we see somebody else that reminds us of what happened to us before. So hatred builds up in our heart. Anger builds up in our heart. Rage builds up in our heart. And it is applied. We act in it. We move in it. Sometimes we eat and drink it. It becomes a part of our normal life. Okay? And that creates an opening. And so if you look at, I always say to different people, for every cause there is an effect. If you have people that suffer rejection all the time or trauma and hurt, that hurt builds up, like I said, anger, rage, and hatred. People gonna snap. This is why some people snap. This is why some people go crazy. This is why some people shoot up different places. This is why. Because of rejection. Now, this is not all the time, but sometimes that's why. Okay? So we have to be mindful of that and be careful with that. A child as a victim of circumstance, I understand why that it was important for me to do skin to skin with my baby. Okay? So when we talked about kids suffering rejection from the mother's womb, okay, so I had a baby, and for my other children, I would always ask the nurses to clean up the baby, okay, because they just came out the womb, they got all that stuff on, clean them up a little bit, I'm just saying. But this time, my personal doctor was there, and he was like, "No, you you put the baby right on your skin to skin." I'm like, "You sure? You don't want to clean, have the baby cleaned up a little bit, wipe down, something?" And he's like, "No, you put the baby on your skin, on your chest, skin to skin." I said, "Okay, all right." So I did that, and from that, I realized that that was so important, because just from that small act, that shut the door for rejection in that area in my child's life. Because that skin to skin is, that baby feels me and I feel that baby. And that there's a bond there. There's a connection there. That baby also, even though it's a baby, probably feels safe at that moment. And feel loved and cared for at that moment. So, which shut down or shut the door of rejection at that moment. Now, being that happened at that moment, I wish I would have did that with all my kids. But I didn't, because I didn't know no better. And that's okay. Some of us don't know no better. I wish I knew then what I know now. I'd be a lot farther. But that's okay. Because it's not too late. And I have charged myself as well to do better, since I know to do better. All right? Now, another form of rejection can be unwanted conception. How many of us have or know people that have had babies or gotten pregnant and did not want the child, or they did not want to be pregnant at that moment? How many of us know somebody like that, or we were the ones that did that? That is a common thing that happens a lot. It's unwanted conception. In addition to the wound of rejection, a baby a lot of times is born that their parents are not married. And this even happens when people who are married. So I'm not even going to say that. There are people who are married and still don't want to be pregnant yet. There are people who ain't married and they conceived that child in lust because they wanted that man, and that man wanted that woman. They weren't thinking about having no baby. They were just thinking about getting what they wanted to get at that moment. And then what happens? Poof, somebody pregnant. Because that's the order of life. You do the do, you get pregnant. No matter if you're married or not, that's what happens. That's the circle of life, or the cycle of life. Okay? The animals do it. Poof, they pregnant. That's just life cycle. That's what's supposed to happen. So, where the rejection comes in is when we make up in our minds, or we say, we don't want this child. Or, I'm not ready for this. That don't mean that we don't love that child later. That don't mean that we accept it. But what happens is that small window that small window of time when even our parents wasn't ready opens a small door to rejection. That's just how it goes. I wish that I would have, I think I will give you an example. When I first got pregnant with my first child, I was married. I was married when I got pregnant with my first child. But I was still shocked that I was pregnant. And I called my mom. I'm crying in a nurse's office at school because I was in college at the time. I was married, but I was in college at the time. I was like, something wrong. And I took a pregnancy test at school. I found out I'm pregnant. And I'm boo-hooing and crying. I mean, I'm just crying because I'm thinking in my mind, like, okay, I forgot the fact that I was married. But at that moment, I didn't want to be pregnant yet. Okay, but you do the do. No protection. And that's what happens. Right? Right. I had to call my mama. My mama had to remind me, baby, you did forget that you married, right? I was like, huh? You did forget, because sometimes we get that thing of being ashamed. Oh, what people gonna say, what they gonna think, and so I was still having that issue even though I was married. And my mom was like, baby, you married, why is you crying? And I was like, oh, well, you got a point. And I was like, oh, okay. So at that moment, after that, I started becoming excited and I started becoming happy. But I wasn't happy at first. I was not happy at first. I mean, you want kids and you wish for kids and things like that. But at that moment, I didn't feel like I was ready for a baby. I didn't know anything about parenting, really. I mean, we know what we see, but I didn't know anything about parenting. I was just married for about a year. So I was like, I mean, it was great, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. But I got myself together, got myself ready, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I love my baby. I love my son. And I would not, change him being in my life for anything. But that still could have opened the door to rejection even at that moment. And a lot of us have been through that. A lot of us have. So these are some examples of how rejection starts. The why. Why do we deal with rejection? Where did it come from? Because I always say, you have to be honest with yourself about yourself. That doesn't always mean that you did anything wrong. Sometimes it's things that was out of your control, but it still happened. So if we can identify those things, even though it still happened, and get to the bottom of it, or some people say get to the root, then we can better handle it, or better take authority over it, or better uproot it from our lives, or better deal with it. Because you can't fight against something that you don't even know it exists, or you're in denial that it exists. So we have to come to grips with it so that we can be free from it. So next time we're going to go further into the why we suffer rejection. And I'm going to give you some more examples of why. So that way you can find yourself in any spot. I don't care if you go to church. I don't care if you don't go to church. Everybody needs to identify themselves and look deep down inside so you can be free from tormenting thoughts and tormenting things and being tormented by the hurt and pain of the past. That stuff can be exhausting, and it's nerve-wracking And it's, you know what? It's time for us to be free, people. It is time for us to be free. Whoever want to be free, it's time for us to be free. Y'all have a blessed night. See you soon.